42 years or so ago, as an awkward, slightly confused teenager stuck in a Victorian boarding school, I first heard A Forest by The Cure drifting down the corridor from a friend's study. And it was at that moment that my life changed. I found my tribe. I became a goth. Even now, all these years later, married with children at university, having mucked about on the telly and written loads of books, I still think of myself as a goth, because I don't think you ever stop being one. Sure, I no longer crimp my hair, slap on the eyeliner, or traipse about forlornly in baggy black attire, but being a goth, it's not just about the look, it's about a state of mind, a state of being. As well as trawling through the archive, I'm talking to some very nice people who also had a passion for the panstick. For one of them, like me, their journey into goth started with the goth poster boy himself, Robert Smith of The Cure. So, talking to another ex-goth, well, I suppose that term is so weird. Are you ever an ex-goth? But anyway, Marcus Brigstock, you were a goth, I think. Are you still a goth?
I'm a recovering goth. No, I would say that I was a goth, but I definitely was a Cure fan first. And it was sort of incremental for me to start going, oh, right, so Robert Smith wears mostly black clothes, an eyeliner, and he does all this stuff with his hair. And I remember, like, the first time my girlfriend helped me put eyeliner on, feeling like it was really weird. It was like letting go of something.
Yeah.
All the ideas about what a man was supposed to be was starting to disappear. And then that tribe that I belonged to became so important in my life. It was so important, partly as a message to my parents and their friends and their generation of like, I am not like you, I am something else. But that was also true of my own age group, that it was important for me to say to a lot of those people, I am not like you, I'm something else, I'm part of something else, without being, if I'm honest, massively interested in what that something else was. But my God, it had a strong look.
At the time that Marcus and I were becoming Robert Smith lookalikes, I did have a dim awareness that Robert wasn't actually goth ground zero, even if he was the starting point for me. This is Faris Badwan from The Horrors.
It was a really interesting time for music because after punk finished, it kind of all split into different factions, and you had all the post-punk bands, but then you also had goth kind of coming out of it. And I think a lot of the best goth musicians, they did actually start out as punks. In terms of The Cure, Robert Smith, he was really a punk, you know, for quite a large part of the Cure's career.
John Robb has written The Art of Darkness, The History of Goth.
The first bands to be called gothic in the post-punk period were Joy Division, Susie and the Banshees. So the term goth it was sort of floating around the edges for ages, but didn't actually become a name of a scene till about 1982-83, when it started to become the thing. And I think most people already in it were going, hang on a minute, we didn't get into this to be called goths. You know, most of the prime drivers of goth itself all hate the term. That's really important to underline. People like Susie, the number one icon of goth, despises the term, would have no dealings with it at all.
Susie Sue might not like the term goth, but as far as most people are concerned, she's the queen of the goths. Apart from anything else, she was so key in making Robert Smith the person that I and so many other gloomsters admired. Because he did a stint as a guitarist in the Banshees in 1982 to 1984, and this has gone down as a pivotal moment in goth music history. But, according to Susie herself and the Banshees' bass guitarist Steve Severin, their music was not the only thing that inspired the young Robert, as they told the BBC's Rock Family Trees.
Robert was sort of like a little brother to Severin. You know, Severin was kind of dressing him up and showing how to wear shades and letting him borrow his, white jacket and jewellery, his crucifixes and that. There was also a time when he started experimenting with my lipstick and...
He got his trademark lipstick from Susie's Lipstick. He asked her for it one day when we were out at a club and came back from the gents wearing it, and that was it. It began.
Not very good. I wish he'd use a mirror to put that lipstick on.
And Susie still wants the wig back, but, you know, it's probably a bit ratty by now.
And so the Robert Smith that so inspired myself, Marcus, and millions of other lookalikes was born. Hair, check. Lipstick, check. Eyeliner, check. In later years, I actually got to know Robert Smith, something my younger self could only have dreamt of. I even emailed him to ask him if he'd do an interview for this programme. His reply was firm but polite. Dear Dom, thank you for the sweet invitation, but I must decline, as I have become strangely averse to speaking in public. And of course, I was never a goth. So there you are. You heard it from the man himself. He was never a goth. I do understand his point. The Cure are a brilliant, complex, multifaceted outfit with a long and rich pedigree, and to reduce them to a goth band seems way too simplistic and one-dimensional. One former member of The Cure, however, disagrees. Lol Tolhurst. He first met Robert Smith when he was 5 years old. They grew up together in Crawley, and he was an original member of the band, although he hasn't played with them for over 35 years. But he has just written a book, Goth, A History. So presumably he thinks they were goths.
Yes, of course we were a goth band, you know, and I get lots of furious letters from people going, whoa, you're not supposed to, but we were. We just didn't call it that then. We didn't call it goth. We didn't know what it was. It was like an amalgamation of all the stuff that we'd ever done. But what we knew we didn't want was that sort of 70s macho, misogynistic rock, you know, where everything was externalized. We were about what was going on internally. And that's why with the Forest, it's very much, you know, it's that almost unsaid sort of mystery, you know, like, well, why are they out there? What's going on? Is it that weird feeling, you know? And we kind of wanted to encapsulate it. And so, yeah, we were goth. I don't care what anybody says.
Do you think goth, there's something intrinsically British about goth?
Yeah. I mean, it's like I say to people, half jokingly, I can go into any small town and I can spot the 5 or 6 kids who don't even know yet that they're going to be goth. You know, I can spot them. I think it's part of adolescence, but I also think it's part of that English adolescence, which is about growing up in a small town where nothing really happens. You know, the only time I ever agreed with Morrissey, you know, every day was like Sunday. It was absolutely every day was like Sunday. Growing up in Crawley, you know, there was nothing to do. So it's that kind of introversion, I suppose. I mean, a few years ago, you know, when Google Earth first came out, I was doing what everybody did. Like, well, I'll go back and have a look at the streets where I used to, you know, wander around as a kid. And I did it with ours. Like our teenage places, and I was amazed. I called Robert up and I said, it's absolutely no surprise to me that we made the music that we did. It's all there in the dank, dark English countryside. That's what it looks like. We played that. That's what we played.
This was John Klein and Steve Abbott on the G Word.
Look at bands like The Cure, you know, writing Killing an Arrow based directly on kind of bits of literature. So the idea that kind of music can involve kind of literary references.
The gothic imagery, it's, you know, if you're a kid in your bedroom listening to music and you want to belong to something, and perhaps you're not the best sports person in the school, you have an intelligence, you're not someone that feeds on going out and beating people up in a pub, then that sort of music, it had lots of literary references. Oscar Wilde, Edgar Allan Poe, so say Nietzsche, you know, Walter Benjamin, those sort of writers, they had something that, sure, it had imagery connected to it, but it was also intelligent, clever, and had some substance to it. When you're 17, all those things, your mind's so active. It's not just about the music, it's about all the sort of culture that you're learning about. And I think it's still strong, you know, bands like Effervescence. I don't actually like half of their stuff, but I think some of the songs they write, like My Immortal, is a fantastic song. And the imagery is more than just a straightforward love song. Without wanting to sound like the Trenchcoat Mafia and the Columbine syndrome, which hangs over many American goth bands. It's writing about love and sex and life and whatever in a way that is more than just the straightforward boy meets girl and it breaks up or it works.
I've always thought that goths don't really suit a hot climate. Whenever you go on holiday, every Mediterranean seaside town has the only goth in the village, standing forlornly by the beach, staring at the sea, their foundation running down their face. But Lowell Tolhurst, a former original member of The Cure, has lived in LA for many years. Probably the most un-goth place that I can think of.
There are lots of goths here. You'll be very surprised.
I always say goths in LA are a bit like seeing Brits doing Christmas on Bondi Beach. It just doesn't feel right somehow.
Well, there's that term here, isn't there? Beach goths, so like
Oh.
you see Hawaiian shirts, with that are black or dark Hawaiian shirts, that I just think that's kind of like a joke, really. But
I'm not aware of beach goths. I'd heard of boutique goths, but not beach goths.
no, in all seriousness, the urge to be goth here came more from hardcore. There's bands like Christian Death. They took that sort of hardcore impetus and then made it darker. The gothest place in LA is probably the desert, because you're out there, it's very alone. You're very alone, and it's very extreme. And actually, I have a little bolt hole out there, because I found it such a brilliant place to be. Yeah. I think, a lot of times people would try to parody it with like, oh yes, there's lots of coffins and bats
Yeah.
in there, and that's a way of really sort of, making it less purposeful, because they don't understand it, because they don't understand that out of the melancholy comes joy, and that's really it. It becomes a way to organize your life and experience. I think goth means to be in love with the beautiful melancholy of existence.